When I was growing up, I watched a lot of John Hughes movies. He was very good at speaking to a teen audience. I'd watch Home Alone at Christmas, The Breakfast Club on Saturdays, Pretty in Pink when I felt that romance was a myth, and Weird Science, because I was a nerd. But the movie I watched more than any other was Ferris Bueller's Day Off. What kid didn't love Ferris Bueller's Day Off? The tale of an ordinary high school kid who skipped school to have an extraordinary day off. It's funny, somewhat charming, and it's most definitely high school fantasy wish fulfillment. It's a treasured movie from my youth. So much so that I even gave a little nudge and a wink to it at the end of my Deadpool video.
You're still here. The video's over. Go home.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be Ferris Bueller, or at least as slick and cool as him. Now as an adult, I look back on this movie through a slightly different lens. How is Ferris so goddamn slick? Is he really just that lucky? How does literally everything go his way with such effortless verve? I believe there's an answer to this, and that answer is buried within another classic comedy. In 1993, Bill Murray starred in the wildly popular Groundhog Day, which is the story of a selfish weatherman being trapped in an eternal time loop of one day, until he can learn to be less selfish and cynical. The movie is a pretty dead-on allegory for the notion of reincarnation, but I don't want to go into detail about that. How does this relate to Ferris Bueller? That's an interesting question. Throughout Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Ferris displays a dazzling array of attributes. Perfect timing, calmness under pressure,
we're pinched for sure.
No way, Cameron. Only the meat get pinched.
supernatural knowledge of things he couldn't possibly know.
Dying.
You're not dying, you just can't think of anything good to do.
Talents and skills which take years to master despite it being clear he's not had those years to master them, and an attitude of brazenness which has no consideration for consequences at all. I'm getting there. Jeez, have a bit of patience. In Groundhog Day, Bill's character Phil, who I'm still going to call Bill since he pretty much always plays himself, is trapped in an eternal time loop. While in this time loop he develops supernatural timing,
9, 8, R, 6, 5, quarters, 3, 2.
brazenness and lack of fear for consequence, skills which take years to master, an uncanny ability to know things he couldn't possibly know.
This is Debbie Kleiser and her fiance Fred.
Do I know you?
They're supposed to be getting married this afternoon, but Debbie is having second thoughts.
What?
Of course, we see Bill develop all of these things over time. They're not supernatural in the slightest. Simply a product of repeated and painful trial and error over many lifetimes worth of repeated single days. See, it's pretty easy to appear omniscient when you've experienced every event in one day so many times that you know exactly who they happen to, where they happen, how they happen, and when they happen. Wow. Do I really need to connect the dots for you? Okay, here goes. Ferris isn't really lucky or slick at all. He's just lived out this day thousands of times over and over, like Bill in Groundhog Day. I know. It could just be luck, right? Well, one of a few things has to be true. And as crazy as it sounds, my theory is far more likely. Either Ferris is the brightest, most astute child who's ever lived and has mastered human predictability, meteorology, hacking before the internet existed, perfect timing, and calmness under pressure, all before leaving high school. Or he's the luckiest teenager in history. Or he's done all this before, many times. Let's start with something small and simple. Ferris and his parents. He manages to trick them into thinking he's really sick by doing something which I doubt any kid anywhere has ever tried in their life. Licking his palms. Who in their right mind would even think to do this? Someone who's tried every tactic and found the one thing which still works. He also reverts to a childlike manner to maintain the image in their minds that he's still their precious boy, which is not all that groundbreaking. I'm sure loads of kids do this. But he does know exactly what to say and how to say it to get both his parents on his side, despite the protestations of his sister. Tricking one parent is easy, since there's always one who is a little soft. Tricking both? At the same time? Not quite so easy. And how does Ferris say he's able to do this?
How'd you get to be so sweet?
Years of practice.
What about something even more simple, like how and why Ferris chose this particular day to bunk off? Just look, right? Well, Ferris is from Chicago, which is right on the cusp of Michigan. Why does this matter? Well, upper Midwest states are consistently listed as having the most unpredictable weather in America, Michigan being in the top 5. Let's take a look at the day Ferris bunked off. Just so happens to be beautiful. All day. Sweltering sunshine, no wind, no rain, and very crucially, it's consistent. It is true that when Ferris chooses to take the day off it's gorgeous, but how did he know it was going to stay that way? Random chance? Not likely, since Ferris makes it clear that he won't be able to conjure up another sick day.
This is my 9th sick day this semester. It's getting pretty tough coming up with new illnesses. If I go for 10, I'm probably gonna have to barf up a lung.
He picked this day because he knew it was the perfect day. But alright, let's get a little more serious. Throughout the movie, Ferris displays a supernatural ability to know what's happening even when it's not possible because he's not there. The first time he does this is when he's trying to convince Cameron to bunk off with him.
I'm so disappointed in Cameron. $20 says he's sitting in his car debating about whether or not he should go out.
You could say that Ferris just knows his best friend really well, but so well that he can predict the exact action that his friend is doing and exactly when he's doing it. Ferris isn't just predicting generally what Cameron might be doing, he's given an almost play-by-play description of exactly what he's doing. The only possible way he could know this is if he'd already seen this event before, in a different time loop. He actually displays this gift twice during this scene, because he also correctly predicts exactly what Cameron says at the exact time he says it.
You're not dying, you just can't think of anything good to do.
A little later, when he's getting Sloane out of school by forcing Cameron to pretend to be Sloane's dad on the phone, Mr. Rooney correctly assumes Ferris is behind the charade and decides to set a trap by calling Ferris on the phone and catching him out, as he won't be able to conduct both conversations at the same time. Only to find that Ferris calls him first and ruins his scheme. How did Ferris know that Rooney would call at all? Never mind that he was going to call at that exact moment. When they actually go to collect Sloane, Ferris insists on taking Cameron's dad's prized Ferrari. Yeah, we could say that it's just the adolescent's dream to drive a car this breathtaking, but a key piece of dialogue hints that maybe that's not the whole reason why.
But we can't pick up Sloane in your car. Mr. Rooney would never believe Mr. Peterson drives that piece of shit.
Why wouldn't Mr. Rooney believe that he drives this piece of shit? It's perfectly plausible. Unless, of course, you already know this because you did try this car before and it didn't convince the already skeptical head teacher. Later in the restaurant, after pretending to be Abe Froman, Ferris uses the restaurant's phone to pretend to dial the police and continue his ruse. Only instead of 911, he dials a different number, knowing it will simply dial the restaurant. How the hell did he know this? If this is his first trip to this establishment as the movie presents, he couldn't possibly know this. Then there's the baseball game. How does he catch a foul ball? Luck? Well, the odds of a foul ball being hit in your direction at a baseball game are on average 1 in 566 chances, if you sit on the lower deck. But then that's just the odds of the ball being hit in your direction. On average, foul balls hit into the section where Ferris and company are sat are usually high-velocity foul balls which tend to cause injuries and sometimes even deaths, even when people are expecting it. So catching them is not so easy. Your odds of catching a foul ball and not suffering an injury? 1 in 835. Ferris could have accidentally sat in the right spot, and he could have happened to catch one of the lucky few foul balls which were hit in his direction at a speed slow enough to catch it without injury. Or he could have sat in this exact spot because he knew exactly which foul ball to catch and in exactly which spot to catch it. And what about the very cleverly constructed doorbell response? When Principal Rooney rings the doorbell, this is what happens.
I'm sorry, I can't come to the door right now. I'm afraid that in my weakened condition, I could take a nasty spill down the stairs and subject myself to further school absences.
Save it, Ferris. Come down here.
You can reach my parents at their places of business. Thank you for stopping by. I appreciate your concern for my well-being.
There are two explanations for this. One being that Ferris, in his 16 years or so on the planet, has become exceptionally well versed in human psychology and behaviour, and is particularly in tune with his middle-aged high school principal. Number two, he knows exactly what to record on the doorbell response because in a previous loop, he's already been in bed and had this conversation with Rooney, and it got rid of him. Kind of, yeah, but not really. Don't worry, we'll get to that. The final thing I wanted to mention in this section is the moment when Ferris realises that the parking attendants took the car for a joyride. Listen carefully to the dialogue.
Here's where Cameron goes berserk.
Isn't it odd that he talks about it in past tense? Almost like this has happened before. In Groundhog Day, we see Bill master skills such as ice sculpture, playing the piano, and an incredible memory. This is because he's had an infinite number of days with which to master them. On average, it takes approximately 10,000 hours to master these things, or 416 days, if you practiced every hour of every day for all 416 days. It's not explicitly stated whether Ferris is or is not a high school baseball player, but given his disdain for gym class and the fact that he doesn't come across as a typical jock, I'm going to give myself a little latitude and say he's probably a fan of baseball but not a team member. But he does manage to catch this foul ball, which, as I've already said, is something which literally has killed people in the past, so it's not easy. He also makes this shot at the end of the movie, which again is not an easy shot in the slightest. So considering he's clearly not committed to being a professional baseball player, nobody with his amount of sick days and lack of discipline could ever make it, how did he get so good? But I'm even willing to concede that maybe those were just flukes, even though by this point you should be realising that very little about this day was blind luck. What isn't lucky at all is this. Ferris is able to hack into the school computer at a time when widespread internet didn't really exist, and change the school records of his sick days. Ferris tells us that he got the computer for his 16th birthday. He can't be that much older than 16 now, but considering he's a senior, let's say he's 18. Is 2 years really long enough to learn about computer programming, then learn about hacking, then learn how to navigate the school computer system, then change the records? I don't know, maybe it is because I don't know anything about hacking. But remember, this is 1986, so Ferris ain't using our fancy modern connections and computers, so it's likely to have been an insanely slow and painful process. 2 years? I'm skeptical. Of course, if you've been living the same day repeatedly for a long time, then it's not at all inconceivable that you'd have this skill at such a young age. Real quick, how many 18-year-old high school kids do you know that can sweet talk their way around every adult they meet without ever breaking a sweat despite committing many crimes? If you answered Frank Abagnale Jr., then congrats. Smart ass. You found the exception. Generally speaking, teenagers are usually easily identified by their lack of control and composure. Yet Ferris strolls around calmly and easily dealing with many a skeptical adult with no real display of panic, apart from when he accidentally stumbles across his dad. Maybe Ferris is just very personable. There's certainly a bit of evidence to suggest that he does have the ability to make people like him. But the people he convinces are often not people who find him charming at all. They're usually the opposite. Most of the time, they're people who find him arrogant and irritating and they demean him. So how is he able to play the role so convincingly even to people who inherently dislike him? Well, imagine you had a script which told you everyone's responses to all the things you say for one day. Wouldn't you be calm under pressure? Of course you would, because there is no pressure. Also, his complete lack of fear for consequence is a result of there never being any consequence. No matter what he does, he wakes up the next day and everything is back to how it was before. Another thing I always found interesting about Ferris is his desire to get married to Sloane, something she finds ridiculous, as does Cameron, because to them, it's a fledgling high school romance and marriage is for years down the line. But for Ferris, he's been dating Sloane for a long time, long enough to warrant marriage. Who knows, maybe he even thinks that it's the thing that'll break his time loop in the same way that Bill thought this in Groundhog Day. I'm sure you thought of lots of occasions when it didn't quite go to plan for Ferris, thereby ruining this brilliant theory of mine, right? Assuming I'm right, and Ferris is trapped in a loop like Groundhog Day, then we can also assume that we don't know which iteration of the day we're currently experiencing with Ferris. The times in the movie when Ferris looks surprised is because he genuinely is. These are events he's experiencing for the first time. Why? Well, this is the fun part. In Groundhog Day, Bill has to learn a fundamental flaw about himself and change it in order to move past the day and carry on with his life. He has to become a little less selfish and a bit more selfless. I believe that Ferris needs to learn the same lesson. Each previous loop, he's focused on trying to have a great day for himself, a day of self-gratification, if you will. In this particular loop, he makes the conscious and outspoken decision to give someone else a great day off. This guy. You see, like Groundhog Day, someone has to do some growing and changing. The movie hints at Cameron's very unsatisfying and somewhat borderline neglectful home life. As his best friend, I'm sure that Ferris is aware of this. Except previously, Ferris has simply manipulated Cameron into doing things which Ferris finds amusing, which is hinted at in much of Cameron's dialogue describing their friendship. So Ferris sets up a day in which Cameron can both cut loose and enjoy himself, but also ultimately be pushed into a position in which he will have to confront and conquer the thing which is holding back his development, his relationship with his dad. All the things related to the Ferrari, I believe Ferris knew. He's a pretty bright guy and I'm sure he would have known you can't just drive in reverse to take off the miles, but he needed to make it seem as though this was accidental in order for Cameron to confront his dad, but without also damaging the relationship with Ferris. This is why Ferris left a very expensive and classic car in the hands of two very sketchy looking individuals. He knew they would joyride because he's done this before, which is why he says this line in past tense.
Here's where Cameron goes berserk.
In a previous attempt, the miles were put on the car by Ferris & Co, but maybe not enough for Cameron to melt down about it. So this time, he leaves it with the parking attendants knowing they will hammer the car all day, leaving Cameron no wiggle room with his dad and no ability to avoid the problem, causing the meltdown and the eventual realization that Cameron is not happy with his father-son relationship and he needs to do something about it. Once this realization has dawned upon Cameron and the willingness to stand up to his dad has finally set in, there's an immediate change in Cameron's mood. And both us and Ferris can see that this is genuinely a life-changing moment for Cameron. Ferris can now sprint home and finally rest on his final Groundhog Day. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is not just a high school comedy about a slightly smug yet affable teen enjoying himself for the day. It's actually the story of a teenager trying to help his best friend.